And good afternoon to you for the 38th time. Governor John Bel Edwards is here for Ask the Governor, and the number is 877-217-5757. If you receive a busy signal, be patient. You should be able to get in, and we will certainly cover a lot of ground with Governor John Bel Edwards on this show, the 38th, the May program, and a reminder that the June program has been moved back one day. It will be on June 20th, Thursday, June 20th, rather than Wednesday, June 19th. Governor John Bel Edwards is here with the Secretary of the Workforce Development Department, Ava Dejoie, and there is good news on the employment front nationally and in Louisiana. In April, the seasonally adjusted rate in Louisiana hit 3.5%, and Governor Edwards, this not only is good news, it's record news.
It is record news. That was actually the seasonally unadjusted number, 3.5%. That's the lowest ever recorded in Louisiana, and it's less than half of what it was in January of 2016. It was 7.2% at that point. So the adjusted number is 4.5%, which is an 11-year
Right.
low, and it's still a really good number. But it's just an indication that we are continuing to move forward in Louisiana. The economy's growing. Things are improving, and certainly we understand there's still work to do. But with the economic development projects, the size of our economy at a record high, the size of personal income at record high, now unemployment being at record lows, I just think it's further confirmation that we're moving in the right direction.
As you mentioned, the seasonally not adjusted rate, 3.5%, 4.5% for the adjusted rate. And when you took office, it was at 6.1% and 6.3%, so that is substantial improvement. And as mentioned, the national rate has also been improving. What do you largely attribute this to?
Well, we have a lot of investment in Louisiana right now, whether it's in the energy sector with LNG exports, for example, or the Haynesville Shale in North Louisiana is heating back up. In fact, production is almost back to the record levels of 2012. But we also have chemical and petrochemical manufacturing, and the really good news is we're also seeing a lot of diversification of our economy. So we're one of the fastest growing high-tech destinations for investment and job creation, which is a really good thing. You know, with CenturyLink and Monroe committing its headquarters there for another 7 years, but also the work we're doing throughout Louisiana, North Louisiana in particular, on cybersecurity and General Dynamics, DXC down in New Orleans. So it's all of this combined, and it has to do with our renewed investment in education and making sure the talent pipeline is in place that will inspire confidence in the decision makers that they can make the decision and make the investments in Louisiana, that they'll be successful because they will have the talented employees they need to be successful.
And before we go to the phone lines, I know you want to share the credit for this, not only with the hardworking people of our state, but with your Secretary of Workforce Development.
I do. So Ava Dejoie, she's secretary there. She's been doing a great job working with employers and workers all over the state of Louisiana. And it's a difficult job, but she and her team are very committed. They work with a lot of local input, and so they're doing a good job. And I've wanted her to be here today to talk about some of these figures and what we're doing at the Workforce Commission and what she's hearing from employers and employees across the state. Secretary?
Well, thank you, Governor, and thank you for having me today. As the Governor mentioned, not seasonally adjusted unemployment was at an all-time high when we took office in January of 2016, and bringing that down from 7.2, the nationally seasonally adjusted figure, to 3.5 right now is nothing short of incredible. So we couldn't be more proud of that. We're seeing gains in New Orleans, 9,100 over the year in terms of employment, in Lafayette, 1,300 over the year, and in Lake Charles, 600 over the year. So we continue to work each and every day. On average, our local offices have 3 events a day. So we're having employers in our local American Job Center, Business and Career Solutions Center offices every day, hiring individuals. We, through a registered apprenticeship grant that we were able to secure from the federal government for the first time in 2016, we were able to expand a registered apprenticeship, and we just had a graduation last week with Apprentice. So we had folks going into the IT sector We look forward to having more individuals taking advantage of registered apprenticeship because it's earn while you learn. We know that there are light bills to pay, there's child care to take care of. So people need to get into jobs and have some income coming in while they're in training as well.
We'll also include the secretary if you have any calls about the topic that we're discussing at the moment. But if you have other questions about other topics, that's fine too. And we start with Clarice in Henderson, Louisiana. Good afternoon, Clarice.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. And I'd first like to thank the governor for hosting the Women in Blue today at the mansion. It was a wonderful event. And secondly, I'd like to tell him what a great job he's done. And now my question is, on the minimum wage, we know we didn't succeed again this year. How do you expect to move forward, and how, other than re-electing you, can we ever hope to get the minimum wage in Louisiana raised?
Clarice, thank you very much for the call. I will tell you, we're not going to give up. It's something that I supported while I was in the legislature. I ran on it 4 years ago. We now have had 4 bills in the legislature to raise the minimum wage. We gave the legislature multiple ways to do it. They could either vote for it themselves or just vote to allow the people to vote. But I'm never going to give up because $7.25 is not a meaningful, adequate minimum wage in 2019. That's been the minimum wage since 2009 when Congress last adjusted it. We're one of 5 states without our own minimum wage, and Congress is out of the business. Either we do it or it's not going to happen. And I just believe public pressure is going to build to the point. I mean, yesterday, Senator Troy Carter had his bill on the floor of the Senate. Not one member asked a question about the bill. Not one member went to the microphone to speak against it, but yet he didn't have the votes to pass it either. And that bill was simply to allow the people of Louisiana to determine whether we wanted a minimum wage that would be set at $9 an hour. So, Clarice, thank you for your call, but we will not give up. And by the way, the vast majority of Louisiana knows this is the right thing to do.
Clarice in Henderson was asking about the minimum wage failure as far as the legislature agreeing to move forward and raise the state's minimum wage. And as you noted, it's $11 in Arkansas, it will be, and $12 in Missouri, and $7.25 in Louisiana. And with these other numbers so good, historically standing as far as employment, as far as per capita debt, if you can't do it now, how can you ever do it?
Oh, absolutely. And again, we're one of 5 states without our own minimum wage. And look, I know it's the right thing to do. I'm firmly convinced of that. I know that the vast majority of people in Louisiana want it to happen. So we're not going to give up in making it happen. And just to be technically correct, Senator Carter returned his bill to the calendar, so there was no vote. The bill is actually alive. So if there's anybody out there listening and you want to influence this issue in this session, you still have an opportunity to contact your member of the legislature in the House and the Senate because that bill is still on the calendar in the Senate.
Now, those other states I mentioned, Arkansas and Missouri, they're conservative legislatures. They have Republican-dominated chambers. Why are they amenable to this in our delegation?
That's a really good question, and I have a hard time coming up with an answer because, quite frankly, I don't understand it. Again, not a single member of the Senate asked a question or went to the floor to express opposition to the instrument because it's hard to oppose letting the people of Louisiana vote to see whether they want to impose their own minimum wage at $9 an hour. But that's what many members of the Senate are in fact doing. They're opposing that. So we just need to keep working. We're not going to give up.
Mary and Hammond. Good afternoon, Mary. You're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Thank you, Jimmy. Governor Edwards, it's nice to talk to you on the radio again. This is Mary Perosco, and I think we've talked on the radio before.
We have, because you used to be a DJ in Hammond, but thank you very much, Mary.
Yes, and I think you were 9 years old when I interviewed you first.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much for calling.
But the reason I'm calling now, and it has a great deal to do with the great economic figures and the employment rate. As you know, I work with people with disabilities, and my son is developmentally disabled. And right now, with the funding provided by the state of Louisiana for providers of services for people with disabilities, our rate is only $8 or $9 an hour rather than what the minimum wage really should be. Right here in Hammond, people can make $12 or $13 an hour at McDonald's or at Target or at Walmart. North Oaks Hospital just raised their minimum wage to $15. There's not a lot of people looking for jobs as the rate is so low.
Mary, first of all, thank you very much for the call. And you and I have had a number of conversations about this issue. And as I think you know, we, with dollars that are available to us, have recommended, and the legislature appears poised to agree, that we're going to go back to January the 1st and restore your rates in full from January the 1st through June 30th, back to 2008 levels. And then in terms of what you can pay the employees. And then we are also going to going forward for the year that starts July 1st. As of right now, the money is there in the budget, I think, as it sits before the Senate Finance Committee, or maybe as some amendments have been proposed to increase to half of that previous level. So we're moving forward. As you and Sylvia and others from around the state have met with me and asked me to do, we are making sure that we're better funding the programs that you all have so that you can attract and retain the employees that you need. And that's on top of increasing the amount that you had available for nighttime shifts, which we had already done. So it's something we take very seriously, and I appreciate the many years that you've been advocating for this group of people in our society, but also for the caretakers as well.
Thank you, Mary. 877-217-5757. Ben in New Orleans. Hello, Ben. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hi, Governor Edwards. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to point out that I'm really happy to be staying in Louisiana after finishing at Tulane Law this past weekend. But I wanted to talk to you because of staying in Louisiana. A great concern to me is an upcoming fetal heartbeat bill coming up in the legislature. And this has been passed in Ohio and Alabama and very possibly could be struck down at the federal level and therefore rendered unenforceable. So I wanted to ask for your thoughts on a possible bill and possibly that bill being rendered unenforceable and whether it makes policy sense to actually pass this bill.
Ben, thank you for the call. And by the way, thank you for staying in Louisiana, and congratulations on your graduation from Tulane. As I have previously said, it's my expectation that the bill will come to my desk and that I will sign it. I always reserve the right to review the bill as it gets to me, depending on what amendments are on it and so forth. And that is consistent with my position on these issues really for a lifetime, but in the 8 years in the legislature and the 4 years as governor. And it is always the case with respect to legislation in the area of abortion that the courts have the last say. For example, we have two statutes on the books in Louisiana now, at least two, that are not in effect because of court action. That may happen with respect to this bill, and in fact, I think a very similar bill was also signed into law in Mississippi, and it is the subject of litigation in the U.S. Fifth Circuit, which is the same circuit that Louisiana belongs to. And so, at least as it relates to the Fifth Circuit, their decision will be binding on us up until such time that the Supreme Court takes it up. But this is an issue that I've been consistent on, forever. I'm pro-life, and we will see what happens with respect to the court cases as they make their way through.
In considering whether to sign a bill, veto it, or let it become law without your signature, do you ever consider whether or not it can pass court muster, whether it can survive a court challenge?
Well, you never know because the composition of the courts change all the time. And first of all, I will tell you, I think this is true. I've never allowed a bill to become law without my signature.
Is that the easy way out?
Yeah, it is. And so either I sign it or I veto it. And I've issued my fair share of vetoes. but I don't believe I've ever just not signed one because the effect of that is the same as if you sign it. And so I've not done that. But as the composition of various courts change over time and so forth, you never really know what a court is going to do. And in an area like abortion, for example, with what I believe to be a very strong pro-life ethic in Louisiana, the legislature is going to give voice to that, and occasionally a statute will be passed. And again, I'm pro-life, so I signed the bills. We will see what happens with the court system.
James in Longview, Texas. Hello, James. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Well, good afternoon, Jim. Good afternoon, Madam Secretary, and good afternoon, Governor Edwards.
James, it's so good to hear from you again.
Well, it's good to talk to you, Governor. Anyhow, I was reading in the news where you and I believe the governor of Arkansas were chosen to kind of oversee cybersecurity measures and everything. And basically, I was just wondering, is your main focus going to be toward hackers from foreign countries hacking into the United States, or businesses, or just your armchair hacker wanting to raise havoc, or all three?
James, thank you for the call. It's all of the above. So Asa Hutchinson, the governor of Arkansas, and I are co-chairs of the cybersecurity portion of the National Governors Association. And last week we had a 3-day conference in Shreveport on cybersecurity, sponsored by the NGA. And by the way, all 50 states sent individuals to that conference. That's one of the only times that has ever happened. Tells you how important cybersecurity is, but it also tells you that we are leading in many ways in the state of Louisiana in cybersecurity. So we have information at the state level we need to protect. We need to help private businesses maintain the integrity of their information and not be subject to threats and extortion and so forth, and also just individuals we need to protect. And cybersecurity is one of those areas where the job growth is going to be tremendous, because this is going to be an issue that's with us for a very long time to come. In Louisiana Tech in Ruston, they actually have the first 4-year degree in the country in cyber engineering. Right next door at Grambling State University, there's a degree offered in cybersecurity. But this is down in our community and technical colleges as well. So it's something that we're very serious about, and we're making a good headway in Louisiana. And we have some bills working their way through the legislature to make us consistent with the federal government's approach to cybersecurity and so forth. But this is one of those areas where we'll never say it's mission accomplished, because the bad guys are very talented and very well educated too.
Last month, right after you did this show, moments later, it was announced Scott Woodward was the AD at Louisiana State University. You've said that you thought that was a good move. What's your early read?
Well, look, I have tremendous respect for Scott as an individual, but also his body of work at Washington and at Texas A&M. I think it's good to have a Louisiana native, an LSU graduate, a product of Catholic High here in Baton Rouge, who's demonstrated that he's a first-rate athletic director at a major college program, to include another one in the SEC. And look, I take nothing away from Joe Oliva. He was here for a long time. We won a lot of games. We won championships. I just believe that the board of supervisors and the leadership there at LSU, evaluating all of the circumstances, made a sound decision when they did. And I'm happy to have Scott back, and I'm looking forward to LSU doing well going forward. And by doing well, I am talking about wins and championships, but I'm also talking about making sure that more of our athletes actually graduate and get their degrees and that sort of thing. And I know Scott is focused on those things as well.
And in the last month, you delivered what amounted to a vote of confidence for the president of the university, King Alexander. There's speculation that he might be leaving. What's your read on that?
Yeah, I try not to get into the speculation business. People have asked about that, and I know that there's some stuff out in social media, at least. I don't know if it's broken into the mainstream, and I don't want to lend credence to that because I don't know anything about it. But I know that there was some talk about, for example, Jay Darden That
was a big rumor.
It was a big rumor, but it broke into the mainstream media, and Jay has assured me that that's not on his radar screen. That's not something he expressed interest in. But I just believe in supporting the team that we have. We have a board of supervisors there. We have leadership in King Alexander. And, there are some things that are going on at the university that appear headed in the right direction in terms of this most recent graduating class being the largest ever with the most diversity ever and most people graduating who are the first-time graduates in their families and so forth. But I am a huge LSU fan, as you know, but I believe that higher education is critically important for the whole state. And so that's all of our systems, to include our community and technical college system. And I believe my role is to assist them so that they can do what they need to do to educate and train our workers, our people here in Louisiana, so there's more opportunity and prosperity.
And for the first time in many years, TOPS has not been potentially on the chopping block, and we'll talk about that one. And Governor, a young man not far from your home, Lane Hardy, is now the toast of the nation. I know you've been following him.
We have, and I had an opportunity to meet him early last week when he came to the governor's mansion as part of the production last Sunday night, and we were able to welcome him home back to Louisiana, and that was a lot of fun for Donna and myself and our children. But there were folks from all over Baton Rouge that came to do that, and it was fun to watch that program on Sunday night and see just how many people in Louisiana support him and were encouraging him, and then to have him win. I thought was really special.
And then when you did the show last month, I mentioned the same day Scott Woodward was named the new AD at LSU, and there was this story about an interloper at the mansion, and I'm sure that gave you pause.
Well, it did, and of course I don't comment on security things as it relates to the governor's mansion. And I've been asked, whether ever was unsafe or felt unsafe, and the answer to that is no. The answer to both of those questions are no, and I have complete confidence in the state police, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. And I do want to note that this program, which you are listening to, is also seen on 27 different locations across the state, courtesy of Hometown Productions and Jerry Mayer, who's been with us every step of the way, and he is in the studio today. And thank you, Jerry Mayer. 877-217-5757. John in Baton Rouge. John, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hi, Governor. I just read in the newspaper that the flood recovery contracts got scrapped because of conflicts of interest in your office. How could you let this happen, and what's going to happen to those people who have to wait for a new contract?
Okay, John. I'm not sure I didn't understand what you said. I'm not.
Could you repeat what you said, John?
Question.
Sure. I just read in the newspaper that the flood recovery contracts got scrapped because of conflict of interest with your office.
Okay, if I understand what you're calling about, that would be a phase of recovery that's not currently active. So the recovery is ongoing with the original contractor, IEM, as we speak. So there isn't anything that happened that's going to delay any recovery out there from the floods of 2016. So I think that's what you were referring to. But if you'll give your name and information to Micah, who is on the line, then we'll make sure that we get back to you.
All right. And if we disconnected you, please call back, John, and I can tell you the governor's office will contact you. Jim at Jubin Crossing. Hi, Jim. You're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Governor, thank you for taking my call. I hope you're having a great day.
Thank you, Jim.
I am very curious. Will you now be supporting a bill requiring mandatory vasectomies for all men?
All right. This abortion measure is gaining a lot of attention and a lot of passion, and I know where you're going with this, Jim, and why don't we just let that one go? 877-217-5757. But thank you for calling. Dusty in Baton Rouge. Hi, Dusty. Good afternoon to you.
Well, thank you for taking my call. I know the governor had done a lot of work on the recovery or the SBA loan, removing the duplication of benefits. But I was just wondering, 3 weeks ago, that's when HUD finally agreed to to handle what they're supposed to do. Is there any timeline for them to do anything?
So thank you very much for the call, Dusty. And what you're referring to, the duplication of benefits exclusion that prevents individuals who qualified for an SBA loan after the 2016 floods, in many cases, from receiving assistance through the grant program, the Community Development Grant Program, which is the main source of funding for our recovery efforts. We have not received from Housing and Urban Development, from HUD, the guidance that is necessary for us to make adjustments in the amount of assistance that we're able to give homeowners. We're waiting for that, and just before I left the office to come over here, I was told by Pat Forbes, who runs the Office of Community Development, that HUD is now saying that guidance is not going to come this week either. And so we are working with them, trying to get them to expedite this as much as possible. We know that our congressional delegation is extremely frustrated as well because they work to change the law, and then they work with the administration and particularly with HUD to get a commitment. But since the commitment was made informally, HUD has not formally issued the guidance necessary that would allow us to expand the number of homeowners that we can assist, or to expand the assistance that we're able to give to the homeowners that we've already been able to help to a more limited degree. And we are trying to work through that as quickly as possible, and it is extremely frustrating.
Now, some measures, of course, look like they're going to make it to the finish line in the legislature, and one of those potentially is sports betting. Is that largely a good thing? Have you decided on that one?
Yeah, so I've indicated that I believe we should do sports betting. For one thing, we know that a lot of people from Louisiana are going into Mississippi right now, and it's not so that I don't necessarily want to do sports betting so that we get additional gaming revenue. What we're going to find is we're going to lose existing revenue to Mississippi because people who do sports betting also do the other games as well. And if they want to engage in sports betting, they'll just do all of that in Mississippi, whereas before they would have done it in Louisiana. So if we do it properly, and if we regulate it, and by the way, I also want to carve out a revenue stream for additional early childhood education out of the revenue that we would get from sports betting. It is something that I am in favor of. And you know, I would like to say that with the amendments that we asked the Senate Finance Committee to put on the appropriations bill, there will be an additional $18 million next year available for early childhood education above what is available in the current year from the state. And so that's a pretty good movement forward. Over 1,100 kids will be taken off of the waiting list and given slots for early childhood, which I think is important.
Yeah. Now, the Advocate on its editorial pages opined yesterday, the headline, "Lawmakers Shouldn't Rush New Lease While Harris is Fighting State in Court." Do you have an opinion regarding this?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I don't know how you could characterize what the legislature is doing as a rush. This has been under consideration for almost 2 years. It was taken up last session, as you know, last year. So there's no rush here, and what the legislature is doing is informed by a study as to what we should get in exchange for an early renewal of that license. And in light of the additional investment Harris is going to make, I think the bill is in good shape and it needs to move forward. By the way, it too has a component of revenue that would go to early childhood education. With respect to the matter in court over whether Harris owes the state taxes for rooms that it comps to individuals, that is before the court, and it's going to get resolved in court. And however that's resolved, that's going to get resolved both retroactively and prospectively, but that's a separate matter, and I don't believe it should stand in the way of us moving forward on the Harris bill.
I mentioned the Advocate since we last talked. The Advocate and the Picayune are essentially merging, if you will. The owner of the Advocate is buying the Picayune, John George's. That means some people are losing their jobs, and one newspaper goes away. But nonetheless, the New Orleans presence will be 7 days a week. Your thoughts about that development?
Well, obviously, I think it's good that New Orleans have a daily paper again, and you know, it's just a function of the market in New Orleans and competition. You now have one newspaper that's going to have both cities. And I wish the Advocate well. And it's also, I think, noteworthy, and I'm not sure that we ever discussed this, but the Advocate won a Pulitzer Prize as well. So I congratulate John Georges and his wife Dathel on that, and all the folks at the Advocate, and I wish them well. And I hope that they can serve New Orleans well, and I believe they can. And they've been serving them well because they've been in competition with the Picayune in New Orleans for a while.
What newspapers do you regularly read?
You just named them, the Picayune, which is going away, and the Advocate. So those are delivered to me every day that they're published.
Do you read any national papers on a daily basis?
Not on a daily basis, but on occasion, I get the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and try to read those as well to try to figure out what's going on around the country and what the perspective is. And, of course, through social media, I'm able to look at individual stories that may come from those publications or perhaps the Washington Post or really from all over the country.
When there's an unfavorable editorial, does it bother you?
Sure, especially when I believe it's informed by misstatements of fact. But, I understand that people aren't always going to agree. And so I'm, for example, I read the editorial you were talking about a while ago with Harris yesterday, and it didn't upset me terribly, but I don't know how they can say we're rushing anything in the legislature when it's been considered fully for now 2 full sessions, and it's been the subject of a study and so forth. So I thought the paper was wrong, but it wasn't one of those things that really animated me or caused me any real concern.
And a listener asked about John Ilario. He may very well be on in his final days as a lawmaker, or he could run for re-election. Would you like to, as a House member again, would you like to see that?
I want John Ilario to do what's right for John Ilario, and I would love to see him stay in the legislature because he has so much experience, and I think he has a way of working with individuals regardless of party, just being a good leader. And so I hate to lose that, but I don't want to be selfish. It may be in his best interest not to run, but I will tell you, we're going to miss him if he doesn't.
Let's go to Sune in New Orleans. Sune, good afternoon. You're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Good afternoon, Governor Edwards. How are you doing today?
I am fine. Thank you, Sune.
Okay, so we are implementing Secretary Dejoie's 1,000 interns in 1,000 days. I just want to know if you plan to take this statewide.
Secretary?
Ava's still sitting here with me, Sune, and so I'm going to ask her to address the question.
Well, thank you for that call, for your question, Ms. Filavaso. And we absolutely are. 1,000 interns in 1,000 days fits with what the governor has said from day one and while he was running for office about providing opportunity to all. And internships are that opportunity, and particularly what we're doing down in New Orleans with the United Way, with Job One. United Way working with their business partners to provide an intro into the workforce for those out-of-school youth that, just don't have a pathway into some of the companies that are there. So by opening the door, we hope to have a permanent place for those individuals. It creates something for them to put on their resume, and also those very important essential skills, coming to work on time, how to deal with your peers, conflict resolution, so all of those things. So we look forward to working with businesses throughout the state to create more pathways into employment for all individuals, but particularly our youth.
877-217-5757. Elizabeth calling from New Orleans. Hi, Elizabeth. You're on with Governor Edwards.
Hi. So I'm currently working on a starting position in my ideal career field. That being said, I'm just barely making ends meet, but I do plan on growing in it and contributing more to Louisiana's economy. So let's just say, hypothetically, before that happens, I'm held up at gunpoint and raped. My question is, why would you prefer I have to give birth to my rapist baby at this?
Do you want to go with that one or let it go?
Well, look, Elizabeth, I appreciate the call, and I've answered the question as many times as I've been asked it, and obviously that is a hypothetical that I never would want to happen to you or to anyone else.
Miles calling from Baton Rouge. Hi, Miles. You're on the air with the governor.
Good evening. My question is concerning ITEP and this Unleash Local thing. I'm a fairly new resident. I'm not from here originally. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. And as I'm paying more attention to like the local and state politics within this state, I'm noticing that with ITEP specifically, it seems to be drawn on partisan lines, and I just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, Miles, I'm not sure that I would agree with that characterization about it being partisan, but the industrial tax exemption program is an important tool that we have in Louisiana to make sure that manufacturers come to and stay in Louisiana. For decades, it operated as a blanket 10-year, 100% exemption from property taxes, which was more generous than we could afford and more generous than we needed to be in order to get the projects that we were getting. That was detailed in a study done at LED before I ever became governor. And the Tax Foundation, actually a conservative think tank group that studies tax policy, said Louisiana's ITEP was unusually generous. And by the way, it wasn't tied to job creation, and there was no role for locals. Even though every dollar exempted goes to local government, none comes to the state. It was the state that was doing that entirely. So I thought in order to make the program fairer, and remain generous and very, very competitive, but something that we could better afford, that we would have an 80% exemption that would last for 2 5-year terms if they qualify for both terms. But you can't justify exemptions of this generous nature if you don't tie them to jobs created or a compelling case for jobs retained. So we did that. And then we give locals a seat at the table as well. And the new program that we have is working well. We are going to continue to address some of the process about it to make it a little easier, less onerous, and a little quicker, but and a little more predictable. But those three things, about 80% rather than 100, tying it to jobs and making sure that locals stay at the table, those three things are going to continue. And I think we're in a much better place as a result. And only a handful out of about 80 applications have been rejected, and I think all of them, or almost all of them, were only a partial rejection. So I think the program is working well, and it's going to work better going forward.
As far as the effort to increase teacher pay, do you think that one will be successful in the legislature?
Yeah. So the good news is, for the first time in 10 years, we're poised to do that. We haven't raised teacher pay. We were at the Southern Regional average 10 years ago. We're well below that now by more than $2,000. $1,000 teacher pay raise and $500 support worker pay raise. It actually received 37 votes in the Senate last week. It's now that funding formula actually gets submitted to the legislature by Bessie. The legislature can either accept it or reject it, but cannot change it. And we need to give a pay raise to our teachers. So I'm expecting the House, and obviously working with them, but we need the House next week. I think they're going to take it up in House Education Committee to move the funding formula through, because without it, you can't say you gave a teacher pay raise, even if you appropriate more money. It's a one-time increase unless and until such time as it's actually inside the formula that gets adopted. So now that the Senate has been so overwhelming in support of it, and it's obvious that the revenue is there because of the improved economy to make this needed investment, I'm hoping and expecting, quite frankly, that the House of Representatives will follow suit.
And you have requested a disaster declaration, I think, for 3 parishes.
I have. So, since we were last here for the radio program, we've had 3 weeks where there were tornadoes each week. And just yesterday, we were able to submit to President Trump a request for a major federal disaster declaration for Morehouse, Union, and Lincoln parishes. And by the way, it was Lincoln Parish and the city of Ruston and Louisiana Tech University that sustained the brunt of that damage, but clearly exceeded the threshold necessary for public assistance. But we're also asking for individual assistance. And we went up on Monday to Lincoln Parish, to Ruston, and met with the mayor of Ruston and the president of the university to make sure they understood what the process would be going forward. But still a lot of work to do in Ruston and on campus with the damage that was done to clean up the trees that are down and so forth. But those people are working extremely hard, and I was really inspired by the students at Tech who went around campus, but also throughout the neighborhoods in Ruston, and helped people to clean up and get back to some sense of normalcy.
Now, you've gotten along very well with the president, but there were reports last week that on Air Force One coming to Louisiana, he was trying to get Steve Scalise in the governor's race.
Yeah, well, I read about that, I guess the same as you did.
What did you think?
Well, you know, I thought it was pretty interesting. It's I guess more than anything else that here we are almost June of election year with an election date looming on October the 12th, and they're still fishing around for candidates. So that was not an unwelcome, deal. But, Steve is actually a friend of mine. We've gotten along well over the years that we've served together in the legislature or with him being in Congress. I think he really likes Congress. I think that has more to do with it than anything else. But we'll just see what happens. And as you indicated, we've had a pretty strong working relationship, not just with the president, but with his cabinet, with the administration as a whole. And we're going to keep doing that because it's the best way to serve the state of Louisiana.
Is it fair to say he wanted to support you as a Republican?
I think that would be fair, but I don't really want to discuss too much of that.
Okay. Nicole in New Orleans. Hi, Nicole. You're on with Governor
Hello.
Edwards.
Good afternoon, Governor, and thank
Hi,
you for
Nicole.
taking my call.
Thank you.
My name is Nicole Barnes. I'm Executive Director of Jericho Road Episcopal Housing Initiative, and we're an affordable housing nonprofit in New Orleans. And my question is regarding a partnership that we have with the Louisiana Workforce Commission and Delgado Community College. This partnership has allowed our workforce development crew, which provides our construction, to be able to develop marketable skills and receive industry credentials through this training program. And I'd like to know, it's been immeasurable for us in terms of the benefit to our program and what we do. And I'd like to know if there are any plans to expand this throughout the state.
Absolutely, Ms. Barnes, and thank you for your question. I think one of the really phenomenal things about Jericho and the work you do, particularly as we see reinvestment in inner city communities, is that there is also an opportunity for home ownership. And I think that is important, not just in New Orleans and Baton Rouge and big cities, but every place, so that those that are from a community can actually afford a home in that community. So we funded this with our apprenticeship grant that we received in late 2016, early 2017. These are now registered apprenticeships. They're getting NCCR and apprenticeship certifications, and that allows these individuals to go in whatever pathway, be it residential or commercial. We want to expand these initiatives, and we look forward to doing that across the state. It's a great model.
Well, we've got to roll, but thank you, Secretary Ava Dejoie, and congratulations on the good news on the employment front. Governor, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Jim.
Always a pleasure, and we'll be back on June 20th of the next month. That'll be a Thursday. Until then, thanks for listening, and stay tuned.